Let's go. Okay, so I've literally just finished listening to the new Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone audiobook. So I'll be honest, I did not have massive expectations for this. I'm a huge fan of the Stephen Fry audiobooks, and I have been for ages. So basically I was thinking, well, how much better can they be? And wow, was I wrong. This new audiobook was a phenomenally enjoyable experience, so I thought I would drop a cheeky little review video to share my thoughts. So, to confirm, I'm not reviewing the story that we all know and love. I'm basically reviewing the production of this audiobook. So, the first thing to know is that obviously this is a full cast audiobook edition, which means we've mostly got different actors for different characters and a dedicated narrator. I was unsure if I was going to find this a bit annoying, but boy oh boy was I wrong. Overall, it was fabulous. The audiobook is narrated by Cush Gumbo, and she was good. Is it quite Stephen Fry? Possibly not, but it was solid. Something I did notice though was that they seem to have cut some of the narrations where there is dialogue happening. So for instance, in the book, if it was going to say, said Ron proudly after Ron has said something, this audiobook seems to have cut a lot of stuff like that out, which I think is fine, as presumably they just want to make the dialogue between characters more immersive as possible. But I did sort of struggle at the very beginning to work out who was saying what, but you sort of quickly get used to which voice is which character. As long as they're not cutting out too much, I think it's fine. But overall, the narration was pretty solid, so I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. The only thing stopping it being higher for me is that I did notice that they'd cut out some of the dialogue narration, and as I said before, I was struggling a little bit at the beginning to work out who was who. Okay, so the characters. Let's start with the most powerful wizard in the world, Dumbledore. So Dumbledore was being voiced by Hugh Laurie, which at first glance you're like, whoa. I had huge expectations of his version of Dumbledore, but to be honest, I was actually a bit disappointed. I just wasn't getting the wise, calm, venerable voice that I was expecting from Dumbledore. It's quite hard to put your finger on the exact problem. It might be as simple as he didn't sound old enough. I'm sort of clutching at straws here, but there was just something jarring about Hugh Laurie's voice as Dumbledore that did not sound right. It definitely wasn't as good as Stephen Fry's version of Dumbledore, for sure. When you're just doing the voice of a character, as you are in an audiobook, you've got to make sure that you're doing a lot to portray the character just through their voice, as you obviously don't have anything else at your disposal. So all I can say is that Hugh Laurie did not do enough to portray Dumbledore's age and wisdom. The same could not be said though for Michelle Gomez as Professor McGonagall. She was amazing, possibly my favourite. Her natural Scottish accent works an absolute treat. She was perfect, I thought. She masterfully portrayed the classiness, uptightness, sternness, and occasional softness that all form McGonagall's character. Now, for Hagrid. So, Mark Addy was portraying Hagrid, and when you hear that, you're like, yeah, Mark Addy as Hagrid seems like a pretty bang-on choice. But it was a bit of a flop for me. I feel like he made a bold character choice pretty early on, and he kind of just had to stick to it. So I found it really monotone. The bits where Hagrid are emotional, I think he did really well, but it's more that when he wasn't emotional, he sort of reverted to this robotic, monotonic sort of way of speaking. For me, the issue is that Hagrid is supposed to be like this warm, gentle, clumsy, bumbling half-giant who is often sort of saying the wrong thing and getting into trouble. There's actually quite a lot of different parts to Hagrid's character, and this sort of one-note way of voicing a lot of his lines, which is what I think Mark Addy did, didn't really give room for the different parts of Hagrid's character to shine through. In fairness, as the books go on, Hagrid does get in more and more trouble, and he becomes more and more of this bumbling, nervous, flustered sort of character, whilst also experiencing a lot of emotional turmoil and ups and downs. So hopefully Mark Addy can reflect this in the way that he voices him, because for me, in this first book, it just wasn't the best. Looking at the rest of the Hogwarts staff, personal highlights for me were Riz Ahmed as Snape, Sacha Dhawan as Quirrell, and Adil Akhtar as Filch. All three were, in my opinion, really, really good. I think they're all class actors, to be fair, so I shouldn't be that surprised, but they all sort of put a unique spin on their respective characters. Most of all, Adil Akhtar as Filch took a completely fresh angle on Filch versus what we saw in the films. Rather than this creepy, deranged sort of oddball, he's more of like an intimidating sort of crook with a Cockney accent that I actually thought worked really well. Hats off to him for putting a fresh spin on the character and taking a bit of a risk. Same for Riz Ahmed really, who was able to go for a much less drawling, measured Snape than Alan Rickman did, while still keeping the menacing, intense persona that is such a big part of Snape's character. For me, it felt noticeably different to how Alan Rickman did it, but it also worked. Okay, so now for the students. So firstly, Frankie Treadaway, which I think is how you say it, was really good as Harry Potter. He hit every note really, there was no criticism from me. Now, Hermione Granger was being voiced by Arabella Stanton, who is of course playing Hermione in the Harry Potter TV series. So I was actually a bit concerned at the start, because on the Hogwarts Express at the beginning of the book, I felt like her Hermione was coming across really similar to Emma Watson's Hermione in the same scene in the films. Like the tone of voice, the cadence, everything, it felt quite similar. I do think that Arabella Stanton sort of found her own voice a bit more as the book went on, but I was concerned because like she's the only actor in this audiobook that's playing the same character in the audiobooks as the TV series. And it feels to me really important that she puts a different spin on Hermione than Emma Watson. It was generally feeling a bit too similar for me throughout this audiobook, but specifically at the beginning. I feel like you can definitely portray the main features of a character without coming across too similar to how it was done in the films. And a perfect example of this was Jude Farrant as Draco Malfoy. It was really, really good. He manages to completely nail Malfoy's pretentious, superior, arrogant tone, whilst actually sounding nothing like Tom Felton did. Other notable mentions were Jake Sigsworth as Neville Longbottom, Fergus Ratican as Professor Flitwick, Stephen Mangan as Nearly Headless Nick, and Lenny James as the Sorting Hat. It was so good having Lenny James as the Sorting Hat. I absolutely love that man. Now for the Weasleys. Okay, so we'll start with the good. Hamish Lloyd Barnes voiced both Fred and George Weasley, and I thought he did a really, really good job. He gave us the perfect comedic, confident, cool sort of vibe. Now, I didn't really like Percy, to be honest. His voice was kind of too deep for me. And that's not his fault, but it is what it is. For me, Percy should have like an annoying sort of high-pitched, really irritating voice. Tom Royal as Percy Weasley wasn't annoying and bossy enough in his like tone of voice. Percy's supposed to be really annoying. It needed to be far more exaggerated in my opinion. Now, there was something else that annoyed me a bit about the Weasleys. They didn't really sound like a family, in the sense that I feel like their accents were actually wildly different. There needed to be like way more unity there. I got the sense that Charlie Weasley had a sort of Bristol or West Country accent. We didn't hear a lot of Charlie, we just heard him reading out the letter that he'd written about Norbert. And interestingly, I could actually hear a little bit of this sort of Bristol style accent in Ron Weasley as well. I'm not sure if that was intentional, or if maybe Max Lester, who played Ron, is actually from that neck of the woods, but I could definitely hear a slight like West Country accent in his voice, which there's no problem with, but then Fred and George didn't have it at all, and Mrs. Weasley didn't have it either. So focusing on Nina Wadia as Mrs. Weasley, I didn't really vibe with this at all. We don't get much of her in this book compared to all the other books in the series, but what we did get I didn't like. Mrs. Weasley is the ultimate matriarch. She's a big, bubbly personality. She's warm, but she's also fiery. I didn't really get much of that sort of personality in the way that she delivered her lines. It felt a bit flat for me. We also got to hear a bit of Matthew McFadden as Voldemort. Now, it seemed really good from what we did hear. His voice was like very high pitched and silky, exactly how it should be. So overall, I'm going to give the character acting in this audiobook a 7 out of 10. This might seem a bit harsh, but my issue was that some of the major characters who play huge roles in the later books, like Mrs. Weasley, Dumbledore and Hagrid, I just had concerns about, and I found that their portrayals were actually quite jarring. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the pronunciation of Voldemort. So obviously in the films, it was pronounced Voldemort. Same in the Stephen Fry audiobooks as well. Now, a lot of people will know that J.K. Rowling said a long time ago that Voldemort was actually intended to be pronounced Voldemort as opposed to Voldemort. Now, in this audiobook, they have actually gone with Voldemort. I don't mind it actually, it does kind of stick out because we are so used to Voldemort, but I actually think it makes the story feel a bit different to what we are used to. And that, to be honest, can only be a good thing, especially for the HBO TV series. I think it would be smart for them to also go with Voldemort as opposed to Voldemort, just to make it feel a bit fresh. Okay, so moving on, I have saved the best till last. The background noise, music, and sound effects. So these were actually a revelation in this audiobook. We got none of this stuff in the Stephen Fry audiobook, so this felt so welcome, to be honest. The music at the end and beginning of chapters made the experience so immersive, and it really built atmosphere. Also, so they often threw in background music, like for example when the first years first entered the Great Hall, the music was so beautiful and dramatic. Not just this, but like the sort of reactions and extra bits that they threw in, which weren't actually written in the books, they worked an absolute treat. For instance, when people are talking, you can sort of hear other people like clearing their throats in the background or grunting in agreement, and it just worked really well. Makes you feel like you're in the room with them in a way that we never got with the Stephen Fry audiobooks. Or for instance, when Harry, Ron and Hermione were in the library revising for their exams, you can hear like in the background Hermione quizzing Ron on stuff, which wasn't actually in the books, but they just sort of added it in. All these extra sound effects and background sounds and music really made this audiobook for me. We never really got any of that in the Stephen Fry one, so it made it noticeably a more enjoyable experience for me. Overall, I give the sort of music and background noise a 10 out of 10. It made it feel so immersive to the point that I felt like I was in the theatre at times. So upon reflection, I really enjoyed this audiobook, and it actually made me really excited for the next one. I think the common theme that I noticed was that it's really important for the actors to put their own stamp on these characters, while still being true to the essence and personality of that character. And I think this will definitely ring true for the HBO TV series as well. It's definitely a tough thing to do. It's a unique challenge that you don't get with a fresh story. Everyone knows these characters so well, so it needs to be clearly that same character, but equally not too similar to what we got in the films. Like I said before, I thought the portrayals in this audiobook of Draco Malfoy and Filch were perfect examples of this. So overall, I'm going to give this audiobook an 8.5 out of 10. As I mentioned, it's just being brought down for some portrayals that I did not like of a few major characters. So let's hope they improve in the audiobook for Chamber of Secrets, which is out on the 16th of December. We shall see. Anyway, that is that. If you enjoyed this video, drop it a like and subscribe to the channel for more.